I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I'm Bill Correll. I'm here with my partner in this podcast and in many other things in life, Jan Jeremias. And how are you doing today, Jan?
I'm okay. I'm happy to be here with you, Bill.
You are, aren't you? I get it.
Yeah, I am.
So here's the thing, folks. We are questing for empowerment. Yours, mine, and ours, okay? And here's the further thing is that our conversation is geared to maybe, talking in circles or in some cases, or like, I don't know, building a bridge that we're not quite sure where it's going to land, but we build it and we get it to land where we want it to land after we're up there, or we don't care, But the whole idea is just to take a little bit of time here, typically an hour, and just investigate this thing, called empowerment. And how does that affect our lives? And what does it mean when it's present? What does it mean when it's absent? What are you generally feeling when you are feeling empowered? And when do you notice that you're disempowered? And are you even thinking about that at all? Or are you, self-monitoring, or are you upset and don't know why? Are you happy and just glad you are? I mean, what kind of a state of being are you in? And is it something that you can measure and put into language? If you can, and you can share that with another person, 9 out of 10 times, it's something that you can absolutely transform in that conversation just by presencing it, So I don't know, Jan, I said an awful lot right there, and I'm feeling really transformed at the moment. And you know what? Tomorrow is July 1st, and that's the next 6 months of this year. And I want to declare, I can't tell you where the first 6 months went. It just went by so quickly.
It did. And one of the things you said, Bill, because as we got on today, is like, what makes you feel disempowered and what makes you feel empowered?
Right.
And I think, I was thinking about what we shared, and I said around something that I had done everything I could do. Everything that I could do, I did. And I think that's a statement of empowerment, to realize that you've given it your all and that there was nothing more you could do with this, whatever the situation was.
Yeah.
And there was and I think that that's why, I'm in a different place than I might be normally, where I'm just looking at something that's not working out or something that's not happening the way I wanted it to unfold. And I feel like when you don't give it your all, or where you feel that there was more maybe you could have done, and that could be in anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be in business. I mean, it could be in a relationship. Like when my dad passed, I had no regrets. I had no regrets. I felt like I had given it my all. throughout our relationship. And so I think that it was a different process. And that's how I feel about what we were sharing around this, is there was like nothing more I could have done. And so I think there is an element of empowerment and an element of peace that comes with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a good buddy who was a Vietnam vet, and his favorite thing to say is, all you can do is all you can do.
That's right.
And, people who are like yourself, we're, we're going to challenge um, the status quo if it's something that we are not wanting. If we wanted a different outcome, we're going to ask that question: what else can I do? What's missing? Where do I have a tool that I can use here to make a difference with this? As opposed to people who just complain that things are not working.
I mean, absolutely. Uh, I'm taking this program, and so I haven't shared very much participation, like, when we're together, but I wrote an email or whatever. And one of the things that, as you're sharing that, there was this feeling of what's just one small step I can do regarding this situation? Like,
Yeah.
what's one teeny step, like, I mean, I could do regarding the challenge that's happening? And it could be like you said, let's take a breath earlier, or it could be something. I think, to me, I'm a very aware breather, because I use breathing a lot. That doesn't necessarily do it. If it's like it does it, but I need more practical things, like actionable steps. So I'm like, okay, what's one small thing I could do? It's sort of like if you have a task, like you're cleaning out you want to clean out a room, and you're like, well, maybe I can tackle one drawer, or one, like, kind of thing is in my mind. That's the way I think of it. It's like one small step that I can take.
Yeah. And people, my brother-in-law is, what is Joe? Joe is 86 years old. So he's 15 years my senior. And he can be very, very philosophical. He's very well read. He's a learned man. And he will often on Facebook post these memes. And he starts it off by saying, Papa Joe says. And I know, every time I see that, I just smile, because usually he'll say something like, sometimes we don't start draining the swamp because we know we can't finish it. And then the next thing he'll say is, just because we can't finish it doesn't mean we can't do a little bit, and then maybe a little bit more. We can do what we can do, and we can enjoy it while we're doing it. His philosophy is always one of, let's take something you can't, and let's turn it into, maybe you could. What if you could? And so when I'm hearing you, talk about that, it just makes me remember that what people say and what people do are often completely different things. And sometimes they think that saying it is enough, when it's really, as you mentioned, it's calling for action, some kind of moving structures around. Sometimes it's you moving yourself from this point to that point. I
Right.
don't,
Or I don't know. Right. I mean, it depends sometimes on on the situation, and then also where you are at the moment and
yeah,
what you're capable of, and so, to me, it's almost very practical, small, easy steps, so it's not necessarily anything that's complicated or hard, because I think especially when you're feeling overwhelmed with something, if it seems like it's going to be hard, you tend not to do it. Your immediate thing is that's too hard. And, or if it's a big project, it's like that's going to take too long. Like, what excuses do we say? I mean, I could probably write a book. As maybe we all can. And it's just like this thing. Okay, well, what's one very small practical thing I could do to move myself in the right direction?
Absolutely. What would be the appropriate response to this isn't working? What is something that is doable? So you're asking a question to open up what has been shut down, and that is like your lever, for the world. Who was it? The ancient that basically said, "Give me a Archimedes, I think, give me a lever, and I'll move the world." And the neat part of that thinking is that the first action of the lever is to ask what lever would be required here. What leverage can I possibly produce? What can I bring to bear right now that will make a potential difference? And if it doesn't make a difference, you've ventured, okay? Learn from it and then try something else.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 350 plus undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
But if it's important to you, it's kind of like listening to my kids when they were in high school saying, "I'm never going to pass this test." And then I would say, "Well, let me ask you a question. What do you think the kids who are going to pass are doing right now?" They get this blank stare on their face and they go, "Oh, study." I said, "Oh, what a concept, Holy mackerel, you're almost there. You've already passed." I said, "No, all you have to do is what? Study."
Yeah, there were the few and far between who didn't need to study, kind of thing. But in general, yes, that was a very, I love that. What are
Yep.
they doing? Very simple, not complicated.
Yeah, you think, I'd even started off even being a worse dad by saying, "Do you think anybody's going to pass that test?" And they'd go, "Yeah, there's, Aaliyah, she always passes everything." Well, what's Aaliyah doing? And she's probably studying. And so the neat part of it is that when you have aha moments, like people who are stuck for a while get this kind of unbelievably freeing exhale, a shift in their body when they figure their way out. Do you know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
like, you take somebody who has to get across a river. It's not possible as long as you believe it's not possible. But you take somebody who will not quit asking the question, "Now what do I do next? What's the next thing to do?"
And I think that, like I said, and because I think that even those words to me, when I think about when I'm feeling overwhelmed or stuck,
Right?
not even thinking about next, like getting through what I need to do, that one thing of, okay, do one thing. And when you're done with that, say, okay, now what could I do? Not even thinking of the multiple steps. It's like it's thinking almost very short term, like very like okay, and even it's like when I teach people to meditate in the beginning and people say, "Oh, I'm going to meditate for like 20 minutes a day," and then all of a sudden, they do that for 2 days or 3 days or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden they miss a day or they don't do 20 minutes and they feel really bad because or they go down the whole like whipping themselves because they missed a day or they didn't meet that quota. And I always say, start with 2 minutes. Get quiet, focus on your breath for 2 minutes. Can you do 2 minutes? Can you do 30 seconds? Like anything. And so I think if you think about it, for me, it's like, especially around certain things that have been overwhelming me, can I do one thing, just one thing? And when I'm done with that one thing, and giving myself even a limit, like do one thing a day, and don't go beyond, because then when the next day, when you don't do it, you don't want to feel bad.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, I'll do it one day. I'll do it today. I'll do this one thing. And then tomorrow I can do one more thing.
Yeah. One thing you can always do is do one thing.
Do one thing. That's right.
You can always do one thing.
Yes, you can.
So let me ask a silly question, but
yeah,
maybe it's a question that people who are stuck being disempowered need to hear. Why be empowered? I mean, it's along the lines of, all these people that are perpetually positive thinkers, it's like, what the hell, I mean, really? Are you kidding me? With all this gunk that's going on in the world, you're going to walk around with a Pollyanna grin on your face? So why be empowered? Why? Just why?
Well, I think one of the first things I think of is physiologically. I think physiologically it is much better for you. Yeah. In general, negativity, or however you want to say, whether that negativity is extreme, let's say, like anger or sadness or depression or whatever it is, however you want to label it for yourself, is actually not good for your health. So physically, it's not good for your physical health. So I would think that one of the reasons you want to stay positive is because in general, it tends to be life enhancing. And physically is life enhancing, meaning you tend to feel better. You don't have as many aches and pains.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
To me, I always think that, well, don't you want to navigate the world in less discomfort?
Some people don't. It's
don't. So maybe being empowered is not for everybody.
Exactly. See,
maybe being empowered is just like, you make a choice of, okay, do I want to be empowered? Am I the type of person who wants to be empowered, or do I want to be disempowered?
I love it. It ain't for everyone, and it ain't for everyone all the time. But guess what? There's going to be times in your life where you're going to say, I think if I could sprinkle a little empowerment on this garbage that's going on right here, I could be a happy clam. That's what would be in it for me, But I love what you're saying, that people who are, this is not just you and me, spouting off in a diner. There's all kinds of studies about people with positive outlooks having a much healthier lifestyle, lower blood pressure, less frequency of heart attacks, stroke, all that kind of stuff. This is neat stuff that if you're not stressed all the time, there's an upside benefit to it that is worth exploring, if you want to be healthy.
That's right. I mean, stronger immune system. Lower risk of what I would say bad stuff happening. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
And so, because even then, okay, you have a lower risk for bad stuff happening. But then when the bad stuff does happen, you rebound faster.
Right.
So.
See, that's the other argument. The main reason that people do repetitive small actions is to gain mastery, or you do push-ups so you can become stronger, and so you're stronger in the right moments, or you do sit-ups Um, it's amazing the difference that a sit-up and a jumping jack makes to not doing them at all. Some kind of motion, or even 10 or 12 minutes of chair yoga, as opposed to sitting in a lazy boy. It's a big deal difference. I mean, you can feel that going up and down stairs.
I mean, when I teach, it's like when my students say to me, and I'm not talking about, it's the ability to grab things, like grab things off a high shelf, and, extend the arm full length and not have to worry about, okay, work your hands and your fingers, like all the stuff that I think can become challenging with just, as we get older or not. But because, they're realizing that not moving at all or moving very little is, obviously not great no matter what age you are. But that whole idea of normal, like, being able to navigate or go through life optimally, to me, that's what it means. Like when my students say to me, oh my gosh, I can get on the floor with my grandchildren. You
Holy
know,
mackerel. Who wouldn't want to do that?
that's right. Or I can, like you said, I can go upstairs or I can get stuff off a high shelf or I can bend over and whatever it is.
Well, the other part of it too, I mean, sometimes it's just like the bending over is analogous, to when you pick something up and you're frequently dropping things. You think it's because it's slippery. It's not. It's because your grip pressure is different than it used to be, and
Mhm.
and there's no way in the world that you can take a really hard mayonnaise jar and pull the cap off by hand if you can't grip the sides of it. But there's progressive ways that you can get stronger and stronger, and then the result is yeah, maybe you can just take that mayonnaise jar and beat it. That's kind of a neat thing.
That's right. And I love that. Um, that image in my mind because I think that happens to us all, where all of a sudden, recently with something and I had to go and they actually measured my grip strength. Um, and so it was really interesting to see the difference between sides. And actually now, since I've been doing some stuff, I'm curious to go back and get retested and see if it, if it got better,
Yeah.
um, and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot to be, there's so much to be said for that. Because not everybody has a young person in their home who's going to open it,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And I think if you want to feel empowered, you just look at the exact opposite. And I've been there over the last like month of like not being able to do certain things. And there is this feeling of helplessness or feeling like very vulnerable and kind of frail or frightened. And I think that that's an automatic reaction when you're used to doing something and you can't do it any longer, or and I think it's just so the longer I can sort of put that stuff towards the side and kind of prolong the fact that of my independence and my empowerment, the more I want, the more I want to do it.
I'm loving it, and let's continue to rest with the at rest being why be empowered. Um, the thing of it is that it's one of those things like wood. If you don't cut it during the summertime and stack it and let it dry, it's not going to be there for you in the wintertime. You're not going to be able to heat your home, So the empowerment isn't some kind of a tablet you can take. It's something you work at. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But because we're talking about a state of being empowered versus not being empowered, it's something that you can't just take a stab at. It's the wrong idea after you jump out of the airplane to go, geez, I wish I'd have had a parachute. You got to make some plans in your life if you want things to generally work out well for you. Responsibility, accountability, all those abilities.
And I like what you said. I think that there is that idea, like if you or that let's say happening, that if you, let's say, don't do anything, that everything we're talking about builds up and acts as a foundation for when stuff happens. And I can relate to this and the fact that sometimes, you're like, did all I just like, is all that preparation, like you go and you're like, I don't really know that it really worked, because I think you know, I don't really know if it helped. But on the other hand, I look at circumstances in my life when I didn't see that and then realized that, just like I said, doing everything I could do was helpful, because I think the worst is for that, like when you don't do anything and then, or that feeling of helplessness. And so to me, just the action itself, whether you feel like it does anything when something happens.
Yeah, you're almost presencing a placebo effect where there's at least a side benefit of I tried,
I tried, exactly. I tried. Where, because then all of a sudden, at least, and people will, you hear people say that all the time, or you should say it, if they're that way. I was focusing a lot over the past few weeks on failure and how we define failure and how do we, kind of thing. And, or, and it's that same idea of like, well, then there's this feeling of, well, at least I tried, as opposed to thinking to yourself, well, I'm not going to bother because I'm probably not going to be able to do this anyway. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, at least I tried.
Well, here's going back to that position of why bother, why being empowered. There's a fundamental question in life that you have to make a choice. You don't have to do it so much when you're a child, when somebody else is going to make sure that you're fed and getting 3 squares a day and that you've got a roof over your head and you got a nice bed to sleep in. But when it comes to being an adult, there's a fundamental question. And the question is basically, are you going to be the one who stands up for you? I mean, who said differently, the question is, who are you in the matter of your own thriving and survival? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We don't actually talk to human beings that way. We never ask them who's responsible for them. And as a result, I think a lot of people never have to grapple with that question. They more or less just kind of fumble through life. Do you know what I mean? I mean, things happen to certain people. Have you ever noticed that? It always happens to me. Have you ever had any friend that said that to you?
Yeah.
Why me all the time?
Well, but I think, I like what you had to say, and the fact that there is this element of disconnect, of this feeling of being owed something, and the fact that of no responsibility for anything. I mean, I see it in health all the time. And the fact that, people don't do anything and then they're like, fix me.
So let's stay there for just a minute. And I love what you said, because one of the first examples of when you're not taking care of yourself is when your health isn't good. Like for some people, pretty much all the time. There's almost always a causal effect in their behavior. So, for example, people who smoke, drink excessively, don't work out, and then have a bad heart or have poor circulation, and as a result of it, are not able to function and do things with their family and their kids and their grandchildren. It's kind of funny if you think about the guys like Joe Weider, who used to be in the 1950s and 60s this guy who was a physical fitness guy, Jack LaLanne, I mean, everybody knows Jack LaLanne. He could do 100 push-ups when he was 80 years old. Now, I know some people that are 80 that can do some push-ups. They ain't doing no 100 push-ups, I'll tell you that. But how did he do that? That's because he did at least 100 push-ups every single day of his life.
Mm-hmm.
It stayed with him when he was 80 years old. People who had a peak when they were teenagers, in sports or in school or something like that, I always feel bad for kids who are on a team that wins the state championship. Because for a lot of those kids, that high school performance is going to be the apex for them. The rest of their life is going to be measured as to how they didn't measure up to winning the state championship.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to walk around in many cases that I've seen over my life, asking themselves, well, what was it about that I can't reproduce in my life now? Or said differently, what happened to me? So if you're ever feeling like that, you might want to ask yourself a few questions. Am I kind of stuck where I am? And if the answer to that is yes, the next question has to be in the area, do I really want to get unstuck? I mean, seriously, it's a great question to ask yourself because, you don't have to be empowered. You don't have to choose to not be stuck. There are good, valid reasons to be broken down and grieving, And sometimes that process has to run a course that you don't have control over. However, whenever you say, I'm not going to put up with this anymore, I'm going to do something right now, that's your first declaration that you're interested in empowerment in place of what you've been doing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I think there are, for whatever reasons, and I don't want to, and I don't want to say you should, there are reasons why in certain circumstances that you stay stuck.
Yeah.
Or you actually even want to stay stuck.
Yes.
I think that sometimes it's, gives you time to process and figure out what you want. Sometimes it's a time where, you get to articulate and figure out how do you feel. And in some ways in some circumstances, it's a coping mechanism. It's a way for your sort of brain to catch up to your heart or whatever, or vice versa, so that there's some sort of synchronicity that happens. Because there are points, and then there are points when, like you said, you finally say, okay, enough is enough. And you make the choice.
Yeah, my French teacher used to say it this way: this is something up with which I shall not put. He had his little ways, but the thing of it is, and I want to honor people who are choosing to be stuck and choosing to be disempowered. You've done it out of your own self-sovereignty. But if you're disempowered and you're stuck and you're complaining about it, you have met or as they used to say in that comic strip, we have met the enemy and they is us, You're doing it to yourself. You got to stop. You got to think every once in a while. You're lucky to be here. Now, you might not even feel that way when you're in that space. However, I'd say phone a friend, ask the audience, get other people involved, get into a conversation. If you still want to be stuck after all that, knock yourself out It's your country. It's your free will. However, I doubt you're going to be able to do it, especially if you call somebody who really loves you.
Well, it's interesting because to me, especially of late, one of my primary things is like I look for signs, and I don't mean like, some of it, a lot of it for me is animals that kind of encounter or sort of come into my path where I like look up to somebody. So like this morning I woke up and I have on my on my little front porch, I have I have like, well, I had one, but I now have two birds nests that have built themselves under there. And there I was kind of wondering if they were inhabited because I just saw one of the nests. I haven't seen anything in the longest time. And I looked out today and there's a bird in it. And so I thought, well, how sweet, like this little bird has come to make its home in my home, kind of thing. As long as it doesn't come in the house, I'm good. And so, but I looked it up and what does it stand for? New beginnings. And, and all these different things. It's actually good luck and new beginnings. And I thought, okay, I could use a little good luck and I could and look at today as a new beginning and whatever. And so it gives me a little bit of hope and a little bit of an ability to kind of sit there and say, okay, well, there's something beyond all this stuff that I'm stuck in or all this stuff that's in my head or that's going through my life right now. And so I love looking through, like not even looking for things like that. Like they just appear. And then my thing is that I, even if I don't know the meaning, I go and look them up. But even if I don't know it, what does it mean to me?
Right.
What does it mean to me? So it was just this feeling. And so that's really what I was thinking about, because I think that, yes, you can phone a friend, you could, but sometimes when you're in a space, even when people tell you stuff, you're not open to hearing it. You're so stuck in where you are or so trapped, even. I don't even want to say stuck. I feel like trapped because is a better word.
Yeah.
Trapped in where you are that you just look for anything, I would say, anything you can find. And for me, it's like those animal signs. Like I went out last week and there was an eagle, a baby eagle. And I was like, okay, an eagle. And what does an eagle mean to me? Soaring, freedom, And so I was like, okay, I'll take that. I'll take that sign. Thanks.
Well, I'm blessed to be in this conversation with you today because you're bringing a dimension that I long ago, quit. Okay, I never, I would say until I was probably 40 years old, I was always looking for the meaning, but not the meaning like what's it mean to me, but like the absolute, what's the standard meaning of this that I don't know about, and if I knew about it, my life would work better, But what I'm hearing from you is this sort of kind of a neat way to access empowerment through, at least having a structured conversation as to what other people have said, or taking a moment for yourself to design that meaning in the moment for yourself. And so you can appreciate it and go a little bit further and hopefully tag it with some sort of memory that will be useful to you and come up when you're needing, a little bit of inspiration and a little remembrance. It's like the bunnies that we see every day. Our life has changed around here. We haven't had cats in almost 3 years, And for the prior 47 or 48 years, we always had cats. And I mean, sometimes a dozen, but now we got bunnies. And it was so cool at different times of the day, usually in the early morning, before the school buses go through, and sometimes later in the evening after it cools off a little bit and out of the direct sun. They'll come in the yard and they'll just munch away, on the clover. They absolutely love our clover. And sometimes it's one, sometimes it's two, sometimes they're in different parts of the yard, but they're almost always in eyesight of each other. But when they first were here about a month ago, they were doing the dance. Have you ever seen bunnies doing the mating ritual? It is something to behold. There's a tribe in Africa that does this jumping over each other thing, and that's exactly what bunnies do. One chases the other, it jumps up in the air and runs away. And we went online, looking to see if this was a real thing, or it's a dance that they do, and that in itself was just another shared moment for my wife and I, to just really appreciate. It's not only that we've got bunnies in the yard, they're thriving. They're here and they like our clover, and they're back every day because, well, this is the best clover in the world. It has to be, right?
Well, when I looked it up, there's this element of like, especially when wildlife come and kind of congregate in your yard or here in the eaves of my, like right underneath my front porch, there is this element of feeling safe. Like they have to feel safe enough to do that.
We get
Because,
that.
And then, right. And so they have to feel like you guys aren't a threat. There's no threat in your yard from me. And it has to do, it's energetically, it's like physically, because they're so much more sensory than we are. So there is this element of like, for me, as I sat there and I looked, okay, if these animals feel safe enough to come in and stay here,
yes,
then almost this feeling like I must be doing something right because they feel safe enough to be able to do that, where they could choose to go anywhere. I lived in, there are a lot of houses around me they could choose to go to. And so there was like, oh, energetically, I must give off a very peaceful, kind of safe vibe.
Yeah, we're pretty sure of that too. We've got we have a nurturing yard. It makes both of us feel good just to go outside and walk around in it. It's we're in the middle of the city in Willimantic.
Mm-hmm.
However, with all the greenery and shrubs, hemlock edges that we have and everything, we might as well be out in the country, especially during the summertime when there's no school buses running.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with that said, we're kind of reconnecting with that. We haven't really had that summertime ritual that we did before we bought homes out of state, when we were, different places, different times of the year. For instance, when this week is Wimbledon, the fortnight at Wimbledon. And what we used to do is we used to take our 25-inch Curtis Mathis TV out on the deck, every day, when we were off for the 4th of July and whatnot, and watch tennis out there. I think we're going to do that again this year. It's something that we've really always enjoyed. Plus, it's just, it's different air than being inside. It's also got all of the greenery and the colors of the flowers and whatever happens to be in bloom at the time. But it's alive and it's vibrant. And there's always a dozen different kinds of birds flying here and flying there. It's fun. And then the squirrels, they are the comedians. The antics that they pull, jumping from limb to limb, the branch to branch. And then a bunny shows up, and all that is just this beautiful, docile little being. And when they sit on their haunches and put their ears up in the air, they look like an Easter bunny chocolate. How did that happen?
Yeah, there's something about wildlife and the feeling to me, I see a lot of from deer, which I think are this somewhat like they have this grace about them. Yep. Deer, and even because where I am sometimes, like quite often, and then depending, I don't have to drive far to encounter bear.
Yeah.
And They're always amazing to me. And I just think that there is. And so that's why now these birds, I'm looking at them as being this sign of, many things. And it wasn't always, I would always have looked it up. And I
Right.
think recently, I was on with a friend of mine um, who's from Ireland, and she said to me, "Well, what does it mean to you? Like, like, what meaning do you take from it?" And then all of a sudden, now I've been asking myself that question a lot. Like,
Right.
what is it for me? I mean, I can look up online according to Native American tradition, what it meant, and all the different, which I love to do, but I love knowing what it means to me first before that.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I love you so much. You're so cerebral, you know? You're not just a yoga master, but you're a yoga thought master or mistress, if you will.
Mistress.
Whatever you that word
Thank
has never been anything that kind of connoted anything other than it being damn good at it, as far as I'm concerned.
But it's just that there is this feeling of like, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think it's that kind of thing which brings about looking at something from the on the surface to looking at something and making it an experience.
Yeah, say some more about that. I like what you're talking about.
Because I think that you can look at nature and you can look out and say, oh, okay, that's a really pretty, oh, those are really pretty trees, kind of thing.
Right.
But then you can kind of look at the way they're shaded or that they grow or what animals live in them. And then all of a sudden it becomes like an experience.
Neat.
And I think that when you make it an experience, it holds so much more meaning and it has such a greater impact on you. It's like having a conversation, is you could just think of it as words that are flowing back and forth and not pay attention to those words. And then you can enrich it by looking at someone's expression or the word choices they use or the tone of their voice. And then all of a sudden it becomes an experience.
Well, what's really kind of neat about that too is you do know that there are people who say that occurrences are the outcomes are actually affected by the observers. That's a scientific principle, and it's way different than Schrodinger's cat. But the point is, it's essential that the experiencing of the observation now has changed the meaning and what actually occurred because you're a participant in it. And does a tree, when it falls in the forest and there's nobody there, does it make sound, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? All of those things unobserved is unrealized, and it doesn't exist because it
Right.
goes on all the time and we don't know.
Yeah. And I think if we were looking to, like, let's say if we're looking to do one small thing. So if we wanted to one small thing you can do, I think that, and we've talked about this before, but I think that there is this element, and we all talked about, everybody knows that it's really healthy and really good for you to feel grateful. So it's thrown around a lot, like in so many different circles, like we really need to be grateful. You should make a gratitude list. You should and I think it's one thing to write down. I was listening to somebody who said it's one thing to write it down. And then there's another thing to write it down and really in your mind or when you're writing it down, write what about it you're grateful for. Like, how does it, and make it a sensory experience. So how do you feel that gratitude in your body? What about it? Like, what are you grateful about it? So if you were to think of something like, Tonka's laying here. So what am I grateful for? I mean, I'm grateful for the softness of his fur and for the way he kind of trots and lopes and his warmth and the fact that he'll come up like before and I was on a meeting and he put his head in my lap and that he's just such a sweet guy and everybody loves him. Like there's so many, and it makes it an experience, like something that I really truly feel
Right.
versus just writing down words on a list or writing down things that I'm grateful for. And then it's like, I'm grateful for my house and I'm grateful for Bill and I'm grateful, whatever. But then when I think of Bill's smile and his fluffy beard and, like, then all of a sudden it takes on new meaning.
I get that a lot, by the way. But it's what I hear you saying is the active processing as opposed to passively observing, doing nothing with the experience, not internalizing it. You're going to forget it as soon as it's over. But the ones I think where you have tagged it with some sort of a thought process where it's actually moved you in the moment, to think about it and like these things change our lives. They give us an opportunity to choose a new direction in that moment. And even if it's just a thought direction, that's very powerful. It can be.
Or even if it's just a momentary reprieve, let's say.
Yeah.
If you're going through dark times and troublesome times, sometimes, just that second or a few seconds of like peace or where you're not thinking about that one thing.
Right.
That you're so hyper focused on. Since that's how we are, we tend to focus on the one thing that's not going right,
Yeah.
Or as opposed to thinking, we get it's just that little bit of reprieve in that kind of darkness is huge.
Yeah. I think the neat part of all of it just keeps coming back to, and you just keep demonstrating that if you want to have a high quality life, you better desire having a high quality life. It's just not going to happen by accident. And sometimes when you work your buns off to have a great life, it's almost like the universe does its very best to keep you from experiencing that, even though it is actually happening for you. You know what I mean? There are so many people that want this big thing and have 99% of it, but they're absolutely not able to appreciate or experience it and, just kind of like wade in it and just kind of enjoy it and just be present to it because the 1% is missing. And if you stop and think about it, our world rewards that kind of thinking. Our world is not about, hey, stop and smell the roses. Oh yeah, we get that every once in a while, but we have to listen to Burns or Frost or somebody like that to be reminded, or Maya Angelou, that there is a world out there that is not a big world, but it's the biggest world. It's the one that you're living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I love that because we were talking about is like not comparing your world to anybody else's world.
Yeah,
it's not your world, and there's yeah, it was interesting because I was listening to somebody and they were talking about the fact of, comparison. And so, and they said they were like thinking about this person. Actually, they were a podcaster and they said, oh, okay, well, they were thinking about some podcasters that have thousands, whatever, of how many listeners they have. And they were feeling quite small of like the fact that they don't kind of thing. And then they thought about the life that they probably lead because they have all the other stuff that comes from having like all those whatever listeners or whatever. And they thought to themselves, did I really want to? And then I realized, did I really want their life like that? Everything else that went with it. And they said, no, I really don't.
Yeah. When you start to realize that little thing that you want drags all this other stuff in a long string along with it, Well, be careful what you wish for, right?
Exactly what they were saying. They said all of a sudden they realized like, okay, and this other one, the other person was saying that, she was like sort of like thinking about like this guy who was a manager above her and how she really would love, whatever. And then she realized all the other stuff that went along with having that job. And she was like, I'm really okay where I am, thanks, because I wouldn't want all that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you ever heard of the comedian Rita Rudner?
Hmm.
I always used to love her routine, and she would just like slip into, everybody wants everything. They want it all. And I think, where would I put it? And there's so many different things that I love about her thinking process. Hers and Stephen Wright's, these are all people who give you that experience that we're talking about just by saying a few words. And the other thing that is really good is to be able to do that for yourself.
Hmm.
There are some people, it's like my wife is great at cracking herself up. She's an only child. So her well-being and joy in the world has always been her own responsibility. And even at this age, she still possesses that as one of her primal traits. She will all of a sudden be there and just cracking up like crazy. And then she'll tell me afterwards what she was thinking, and then I'll crack up along with her. But the access to empowerment is to almost a stage where you don't have to think about doing it anymore. It's actually just a different gear that's always accessible to you. The same gear doesn't work equally as well in all situations. However, it does give you access to a next thing to do if the gear is not functioning for you.
Yeah, I always think of it as having a nice, like, having a toolbox full of multiple tools. That in your toolbox, it's not like you only have a screwdriver. And
Yes.
that's the only tool you have. You have a hammer and you have a wrench and you have, whatever else you want in that, but you have multiple tools in that toolbox so that depending on the circumstance, when you need a screwdriver, hopefully you're able to grab a screwdriver. And when you need, and that's a really great image to me. Is this feeling of just having a series. For me, it's just this whole element of never being closed off to multiple things that might help. I've never been like put all your eggs in one basket type of person.
Right.
So it's this feeling of like, okay, I'm going to I'm going to I'm going to look at the situation and then, or maybe not, and just try a tool and say, okay, well, that didn't work, and then knowing, okay, well, I'm going to go grab another tool. I used a screwdriver when I really should have used a hammer. And so, I'm not going to get confused, right now. I'm not going to worry about the fact that I chose the screwdriver. Be happy in the fact that you chose a tool. That's how I, that you decide you're going to choose something.
Yeah, and it's appropriate sometimes when you don't have a screwdriver to improvise and use a table knife, but don't try to use a table knife for other things. You will destroy it. The screwdriver's got a different set of characteristics to it. The fact that it's a flat edge doesn't make the table knife appropriate for everything that you would do with the screwdriver.
True, but sometimes yes, if it works.
Pinch.
Yeah. That's right. In a pinch, you grab that table knife.
Absolutely. So that's, I love when we do this because you and I get to talking, and the next thing we know, the hour's gone by again. Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
With that said, So how would we button this up? What do you think the proton pill of this week's podcast conversation would be?
Well, I do like this whole idea of choose one thing that you can do.
Yep.
And so that's really probably what I would leave everybody is find one thing that you think you can do.
Right.
And even train yourself to do it. So set an alarm on your phone that, okay, just to think about it or take action with it. And then that way, maybe when the need when the need comes up, you'll be able to grab it more easily.
Yeah. Yeah. Spend the time deciding that you're worth the effort.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, that's going to be work. I think the hardest thing for me, Jan, is to be around people who I know have great lives, but they can't experience it. And they're on a path very quickly going nowhere, but as fast as they can. So sometimes the do the one thing is just stop. Stop and see what happens. You remember that, before you cross the street, stop, look, and listen?
Mm-hmm.
Not bad advice for life.
No, we were actually talking about that acronym because I gave a workshop, Mary Jane and I talked about it.
Yeah.
Stop, take a breath, observe, proceed.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of those, and anything where you can take two separate actions and insert a timeout to where you actually look back and see what just got accomplished by what you did, and then predict what will be workable before you move on to the next thing. It's almost freeing in terms of whether you're attached to the outcome of the next thing you're going to do. The more attached you are to that, the less likely you're going to be able to succeed and experience the success. You may succeed, but you may not experience that success. It may be something that just happens and you're quickly on to the next thing. So I like your proton pill.
Thank you.
One little thing.
One little thing.
And as Sting would say, every little thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I have nothing else to add, my friend. I think that's brilliant.
Okay.
But I will say this. More so now than even last podcast, with all the things that are going on in the world, would you reach out to somebody that you love and just let them know how important they are to you and what a difference it makes in your life just knowing that they're there, and that you really want them to understand that if they ever need anything from you, don't be worried about whether you can get it or not. Just be willing to ask and give you a call.
Love that.
So I think with that said, we are lighting the candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Correll, and I'm here with
Jan Jeremias.
And loving it. Bye-bye for now, y'all.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.